Hello family, enjoy this relaxing moment with charm stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section. Also generously hit the like button cause it means the world to us. Please sit back, relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. The grand ballroom of the Kane estate was alive with dazzling lights and lively chatter. Crystal chandeliers hung like crowns from the arched ceiling, casting a warm glow over the glittering sea of guests. Waiters weaved through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne flutes as the elite of society mingled, laughed, and celebrated the union of Alexander Kane and Vanessa Blake. The bride stood at the center of the ballroom, dressed in an exquisite designer gown that sparkled with every movement. Vanessa Blake was the picture of elegance, poised, confident, and stunning. She smiled graciously, accepting congratulations from socialites and business moguls alike, her hand resting lightly on Alexander's arm. Alexander Kane, the billionaire groom, exuded power and charm. His tailored tuxedo fit him perfectly, and his deep, commanding voice carried easily over the hum of conversations. Yet, despite the glittering occasion, his sharp eyes darted restlessly around the room as if searching for something, or someone. As the band transitioned into a soft waltz, Alexander felt a shift in the atmosphere. Across the room, near the towering floral arrangements, stood a woman who seemed out of place in the sea of extravagance. She wasn't adorned in designer labels or dripping with jewels, yet her presence was magnetic. Sophia Miller. She hadn't changed much in the 7 years since Alexander had last seen her. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her eyes still carried that depth he used to get lost in. But tonight, her expression was guarded, her lips pressed into a thin line. And there, clinging to her hands, were 2 boys, identical twins who couldn't have been older than 6. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. The boys' sharp cheekbones, the shape of their eyes, and even the way they stood, it was like looking at smaller versions of himself. Alex. Vanessa's voice jolted him out of his thoughts. She tugged lightly on his arm. The Martins are waiting to speak with us. Alexander didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed on Sophia. Vanessa followed his line of sight, her face hardening when she noticed the woman and her 2 companions. "Who is she?" Vanessa asked sharply, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Excuse me," Alexander said abruptly, his voice low and strained. He disentangled himself from Vanessa's grip and began weaving through the crowd, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Vanessa called after him, but he ignored her. His heart pounded as he approached Sophia. The closer he got, the more vivid the resemblance became. The boys weren't just similar to him, they were his mirror images. Sophia noticed him then. Her shoulders stiffened, and her grip on the boys' hands tightened. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and Alexander saw a flash of fear and defiance in her gaze. "Sophia," he said when he finally reached her. His voice was low, almost disbelieving. "Alexander." Her tone was cool, her expression unreadable. The twins looked up at him with curious eyes. One of them tugged on Sophia's dress. "Mommy, who is he?" Sophia hesitated, her lips parting as though searching for the right words. "Just an old friend," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. Alexander's jaw tightened. "An old friend." His gaze flicked to the boys. "Sophia, can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea," she replied quickly, her voice firm. "This isn't the time or place." "Mommy, can we have some cake?" the other twin asked, his wide eyes darting toward the dessert table. "In a minute, Ethan," Sophia said softly, brushing a hand over his hair. Ethan. The name hit Alexander like a wave. It was the name he had once mentioned he would want for a son, back when he and Sophia were younger, when they dreamed about a future together. "Please, Sophia," Alexander said, his tone more urgent now. "I need to talk to you. Alone." Sophia squared her shoulders, her voice steady but low. "I don't owe you anything, Alexander. Enjoy your wedding." Her words stung, but Alexander didn't back down. "Those boys," he said, gesturing toward them, "they look just like me." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" He crouched slightly to meet the boy's eyes. "Hi there," he said softly, his voice gentle. What are your names? The twins looked to their mother for guidance, but Sophia's face was a mask of tension. Finally, one of them spoke. I'm Ethan, he said shyly. And this is Liam. Alexander felt his chest tighten. Ethan and Liam. He glanced back at Sophia, whose face was pale now, her composure cracking. 7 years, Alexander said quietly, his voice laced with accusation. It's been 7 years, hasn't it? Sophia stepped in front of the boys, shielding them from his view. I told you, this isn't the place, she hissed. Go back to your wife, Alexander. The words hit him like a slap, but he couldn't tear himself away. Sophia, if they're mine. They're mine, she interrupted, her voice sharp. Mine. And that's all you need to know. Mommy. Ethan's voice was small, his face confused. Are we in trouble? Sophia knelt down, pulling both boys into a protective hug. No, sweetheart. Everything's fine. Alexander stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The air between him and Sophia was thick with tension, with unsaid words and unresolved emotions. He wanted answers, needed them, but the sight of the twins, confused and vulnerable, kept him from pressing further. Vanessa's voice broke the moment. Alexander. She marched toward them, her heels clicking furiously. What is going on here? Sophia straightened, her expression hardening once again. Nothing, she said, her voice cold. We were just leaving. She took the boy's hands and turned to go, but Alexander grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to make her pause. This isn't over, Sophia, he said, his voice low and determined. We're going to talk. She pulled her arm free and looked at him with a mixture of anger and sadness. It was over a long time ago, Alexander. You just didn't notice. And with that, she walked away, the twins in tow, disappearing into the crowd. Alexander stood there, his mind racing. Vanessa reached his side, her face flushed with irritation. Who was that, Alex? She demanded. And why were you talking to her? But Alexander barely heard her. His gaze remained fixed on the spot where Sophia had been, his thoughts consumed by the twins who looked so much like him, and the secret she was clearly hiding. The charity gala was in full swing, the grand hall buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft classical music. Guests in glamorous gowns and tailored tuxedos moved elegantly across the polished floor, engaging in light-hearted conversations or bidding on extravagant auction items. Sophia Miller stood near a table lined with hors d'oeuvres, adjusting the straps of her modest but elegant black dress. Unlike most of the attendees, she wasn't dripping in diamonds or holding a designer clutch. She was here as a guest of a friend, a rare opportunity to experience the high life, even if only for one evening. She looked around, feeling slightly out of place but determined to enjoy herself. It was then her eyes fell on a figure that made her heart skip a beat. Alexander Kane. Even in the crowded hall, he stood out. His confident posture, sharp jawline, and easy smile made him magnetic. Clad in a sleek black tuxedo, he exuded power and charm, his presence commanding attention without effort. Sophia recognized him immediately, not just because he was a billionaire often featured in magazines, but because they had shared a history. A high school connection, fleeting but unforgettable. She debated approaching him. What would she even say? They hadn't spoken in years. As she wrestled with her thoughts, Alexander turned, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing squarely on her. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Sophia, he called, his deep voice cutting through the ambient noise as he approached her with an easy smile. Alexander, she replied, her voice softer than she intended. Her cheeks flushed as memories of their teenage years came rushing back. What a surprise, he said, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for traces of the girl he once knew. I didn't expect to see you here. Likewise, she said, managing a small smile. I'm here as a guest of a friend. You? He chuckled. Hosting, as always. It's a fundraiser for one of my foundations. Of course it is, she said, her tone light but laced with a touch of teasing. Still the overachiever, I see. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Some things never change. For a moment, They stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "Can I get you a drink?" he asked, motioning toward the bar. Sophia hesitated, but then nodded. "Sure. Why not?" The bar was quieter, tucked into a corner of the expansive hall. Alexander handed her a glass of sparkling wine before ordering a whiskey for himself. "So, what have you been up to all these years?" he asked, leaning casually against the bar. "Oh, you know," Sophia said, swirling her wine glass. "Nothing as grand as hosting charity galas. I'm a teacher now." "A teacher," he repeated, nodding appreciatively. "That suits you. You always had a way with people. And you," she said, glancing at him, "seem to have done quite well for yourself. Billionaire, philanthropist, all-around golden boy." He smirked. "It's not as glamorous as it sounds. A lot of work, a lot of long nights. But it has its moments. Like this gala?" "Exactly." He raised his glass. "And reconnecting with old friends." Sophia laughed softly, her nerves easing as the conversation flowed. It was almost too easy, the way they slipped back into a comfortable rhythm, as if no time had passed. As the night wore on, they found themselves stepping out onto the balcony, seeking a brief escape from the noise and heat of the hall. The cool night air was refreshing, the city lights twinkling in the distance. "This view is incredible," Sophia said, leaning against the railing. "Almost as incredible as running into you tonight," Alexander said, his tone softer now. She turned to look at him, her heart racing. "You always did know how to charm people." He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers. "I'm not trying to charm anyone. I'm just being honest." The tension between them was palpable. Sophia tried to look away, but his presence was magnetic, drawing her back. "Alex," she said softly, using the nickname she hadn't spoken in years. "What are we doing?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to stop." One thing led to another, and the night ended in Alexander's penthouse. The walls they'd carefully kept up crumbled under the weight of old feelings and new desires. It wasn't planned. It wasn't logical. But in that moment, it felt right. When morning came, Sophia woke to find Alexander already dressed, his phone pressed to his ear as he stood by the window. "Business as usual," he said with a small smile when he noticed her stirring. "I have to fly out to Tokyo this afternoon." Sophia nodded, her heart sinking a little. She had known it was fleeting, but hearing it out loud still stung. "Last night was unexpected," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But it was good to see you again, Sophia." "You too," she said, forcing a smile. And just like that, they parted ways. Weeks later, Sophia's world turned upside down. A missed period led to a pregnancy test, which confirmed what she had suspected. She was carrying Alexander's child, or, as she would later discover, children. Her first instinct was to reach out to him. He had a right to know. But when she called his office, she was met with resistance. "Mr. Kane is unavailable," said a cool voice on the other end of the line. "It's urgent," Sophia insisted. "Please tell him it's Sophia Miller. He'll know who I am." There was a pause, followed by a sharp response. "Ms. Miller, Mr. Kane has no interest in revisiting the past. I suggest you move on." Sophia's hand trembled as she ended the call. She tried again over the following weeks, sending letters and emails, but each attempt was met with silence. It became painfully clear that Alexander's world had no room for her, or their unborn children. The parking lot was quiet, a stark contrast to the opulent chaos of the wedding reception inside. The dim glow of streetlights illuminated the rows of luxury cars, their polished surfaces gleaming under the night sky. Alexander's footsteps echoed against the concrete as he strode purposefully through the lot, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned and his tie loosened. His mind was racing, his emotions a turbulent mix of confusion, anger, and disbelief. He finally spotted her near the far end of the lot, standing beside an older sedan. Sophia was helping the twins into the back seat, her movements quick and deliberate. She looked up as Alexander approached, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of surprise and defiance. Sophia, Alexander called, his voice low but firm. She stiffened but didn't reply. Instead, she turned her attention back to the boys, murmuring something to them before closing the car door. Straightening, she faced him, her arms crossed over her chest. "What do you want, Alexander?" she asked, her tone cold. "What do I want?" he echoed, his voice rising slightly. "I want answers, Sophia. What the hell is going on?" Sophia's expression didn't waver. "There's nothing to explain." "Nothing to explain?" He stepped closer, his eyes blazing. "Don't insult my intelligence. Those boys, Ethan and Liam, they're mine, aren't they?" Sophia's lips tightened, but she didn't respond. "Don't stand there and act like this is nothing," Alexander continued, his frustration boiling over. "You show up at my wedding with two boys who look exactly like me, and you expect me not to ask questions?" Sophia took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with anger. "I didn't show up at your wedding, Alexander. I was invited." "By who?" he demanded. She hesitated, then said, "Vanessa's mother. I'm her charity coordinator." Alexander froze, the pieces slowly clicking into place. Vanessa's family had always been involved in philanthropy, and it wasn't unusual for them to invite staff to events. But that didn't explain why Sophia hadn't said anything earlier. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice quieter now but no less intense. "Why didn't you tell me about them?" Sophia took a step closer, her posture rigid. "I tried, Alexander. 7 years ago, I tried to tell you. I called your office, sent emails, even wrote a letter. Do you know what I got in return? Your assistant telling me you weren't interested in revisiting the past." Alexander's brow furrowed. "My assistant? I never got any messages." "Exactly," she snapped. "You were too busy flying around the world, building your empire, to care about the consequences of that one night." "That's not fair," Alexander shot back. "You didn't even give me a chance." Sophia's laugh was bitter. "A chance? I had to figure out how to raise twins on my own, Alexander. I had to give up everything. My job, my plans for the future, while you went on with your perfect life." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, and Alexander felt a pang of guilt he couldn't ignore. "Mommy." A small voice broke the silence. Both adults turned to see Ethan peeking out from the backseat window, his wide eyes darting nervously between them. Beside him, Liam leaned forward, curiosity written all over his face. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. Sophia's expression softened immediately. She walked to the car, opening the door to crouch down beside her sons. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. "Everything's okay." Alexander stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the twins. The resemblance was undeniable. He took a tentative step closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hi there," he said softly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "I'm Alexander." The boys looked at him curiously but didn't respond. Sophia straightened, placing herself between them and Alexander. "They don't need to know who you are," she said firmly. "I have a right to know them," Alexander countered, his voice firm but calm. "They're my sons, Sophia." "Your sons." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. "You don't get to claim them now, Alexander. You weren't there for the sleepless nights, the doctor's visits, the endless questions about why they don't have a dad." "I didn't know," he said, his tone almost pleading. "If I had—" "But you didn't," she interrupted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And now you think you can just walk back into my life and demand answers? Demand a relationship with them? It doesn't work that way." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt warring within him. "I'm not trying to take anything away from you, Sophia. I need to understand." Sophia sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "You don't understand because you've never had to. You've always had the world handed to you on a silver platter, Alexander. But me, I've had to fight for everything. Mommy." Liam's voice was soft, hesitant. Who is he? Sophia hesitated, glancing at Alexander before turning back to her sons. He's someone I used to know, she said finally. Alexander's heart sank at her words. He wanted to protest, to tell the boys the truth, but the look in Sophia's eyes stopped him. She wasn't just angry, she was hurt, deeply and irrevocably. I'm not going to disappear again, he said quietly. You need to know that, Sophia. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. We'll see. Without another word, she opened the driver's side door and slid into the car. The twins waved shyly at Alexander as the engine roared to life, and then they were gone, leaving him standing alone in the parking lot. For the first time in years, Alexander Kane felt powerless. And for the first time, he realized he had more to fight for than his wealth or reputation. Alexander sat in his study late at night, the wedding band on his finger feeling heavier with each passing moment. The events of the past few days replayed endlessly in his mind. Sophia, the twins, their striking resemblance to him, and the truth she had tried to share years ago. Something didn't add up, and he was determined to find answers. He leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes scanning the documents spread across his desk. Calls to his former assistant, emails he'd requested from IT, and notes from a private investigator lay before him. The deeper he dug, the more pieces began to fall into place, each one painting a damning picture of Vanessa's involvement. His former assistant, Lauren, had been hesitant to speak at first. But after some pressure, and the promise of anonymity, she had confessed everything during a tense phone call earlier that day. Lauren, I need the truth, Alexander said, his voice firm but controlled. Did Sophia ever try to contact me 7 years ago? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Kane, I don't know if I should. Lauren, Alexander interrupted, his tone softening. This isn't about the past. It's about my sons, my family. Please, just tell me. Another pause. Then, a shaky sigh. Yes, she did. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. And I was told to block her, Lauren admitted. She called several times, sent emails, even a letter. I didn't let any of it reach you. Who told you to block her? Alexander asked, though he already suspected the answer. It was Vanessa, Lauren confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. She said Sophia was trying to blackmail you and that it would ruin your reputation. She offered me a lot of money to make sure you never heard from Sophia. Alexander's chest tightened as her words sunk in. Why didn't you come to me? I needed the money, Lauren said, her voice breaking. And Vanessa was persuasive. I'm so sorry, Mr. Kane. The call had ended hours ago, but the weight of Lauren's confession lingered. Vanessa, his new wife, had orchestrated the entire deception. She had manipulated his life, ensured he stayed ignorant of Sophia and the twins, all to secure her place by his side. Alexander's hands curled into fists as anger surged within him. He thought about Sophia, how she must have felt abandoned, how she had carried the burden of raising their children alone while he remained blissfully unaware. Vanessa had robbed him of 7 years with his sons. And for what? Money. Status. The truth burned in his chest like fire. 7 years ago, Sophia had stared at the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Her world had tilted on its axis as the reality of her situation sunk in. She was going to be a mother, of not 1, but 2 children. And she was going to do it alone. Her first instinct had been to contact Alexander. He had a right to know, and she desperately wanted his support. But every call, email, and letter she sent was met with silence. It was as if he had erased her from his life completely. When her belly began to show, whispers spread like wildfire through her small community. The unmarried teacher who had always kept to herself was suddenly the subject of endless gossip. People whispered in hushed tones as she walked past, their judgmental stares cutting her like knives. One afternoon, as Sophia walked home from the grocery store, an older woman from her neighborhood stopped her on the sidewalk. Is it true? The woman asked, her voice dripping with disdain. You're having a child out of wedlock? Sophia hesitated, her cheeks burning with shame. I don't think that's any of your business. It's everyone's business, the woman snapped. What kind of example are you setting for our children? Sophia clutched her grocery bag tightly, fighting back tears. I'm doing the best I can. Your parents must be so ashamed, the woman added, shaking her head. Sophia didn't respond. She turned and walked away, her head held high, but the sting of the woman's words stayed with her. Her parents had been no more supportive. When she told them she was pregnant, they were horrified. How could you do this to us, Sophia? Her mother had cried, tears streaming down her face. Do you know how this will look to our family? To the church. Her father had been colder. You've embarrassed us. If you want to keep those children, you'll do it on your own. You're not welcome here anymore. Sophia had left that day with nothing but a small suitcase and a heavy heart. She moved into a tiny apartment on the edge of town, scraping by on her meager savings and whatever work she could find. When the twins were born, all the pain and judgment faded into the background. Holding Ethan and Liam for the first time, Sophia felt an overwhelming surge of love and purpose. They're perfect, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she cradled them in her arms. You're everything I need. The sleepless nights and endless feedings were exhausting, but Sophia never complained. Every smile, every laugh, every tiny milestone made the struggle worth it. She worked tirelessly to provide for her boys, taking on extra tutoring jobs and working late into the night. Mommy, Ethan said one evening, his tiny voice breaking the silence of their small apartment. Sophia froze, her heart swelling. What did you say, sweetheart? Mommy, he repeated, reaching for her. She scooped him up, laughing and crying at the same time. That's right, my love. Mommy's here. Liam, not to be outdone, babbled something that sounded suspiciously like mama, prompting more tears and laughter. Through every hardship, Sophia found strength in her sons. They were her reason to keep going, her motivation to face another day. She shielded them from the judgment of others, teaching them to hold their heads high and to be proud of who they were. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small, she told them one evening as they sat around the dinner table. You are strong. You are loved. And you can do anything you set your minds to. Ethan and Liam nodded solemnly, their innocent faces filled with trust and admiration. To them, Sophia was a superhero, a mother who could conquer anything. As Alexander stared at the ceiling of his study, the weight of Sophia's journey and Vanessa's betrayal pressed heavily on his chest. He had to make this right, not just for himself, but for Sophia and the boys. The life he thought he had built with Vanessa was a lie, but now he had a chance to reclaim what truly mattered. And this time, he wouldn't let anything, or anyone, stand in his way. The park was alive with the sound of children's laughter and the distant hum of joggers on the paved paths. The late afternoon sun bathed the area in golden light, casting long shadows of swings and slides across the grass. Alexander Kane sat on a weathered bench near the edge of the playground, his hands clasped as he gazed absent-mindedly at the scene before him. He hadn't planned to come here today. After days of wrestling with the truth about Sophia and the twins, he had needed a place to think. The park, with its calm and cheerful atmosphere, seemed like the perfect escape. Little did he know, fate had other plans. Two boys, identical in every way, dashed across the grass, their laughter catching his attention. Alexander's breath hitched as he recognized them instantly, Ethan and Liam. They were unmistakably his. He watched as they chased each other around a large oak tree, their energy boundless. Ethan climbed onto the lowest branch, his face lit with determination, while Liam cheered him on from below. Careful up there, Liam called out, shielding his eyes from the sun. I got it, Ethan replied, his small hands gripping the branch tightly. Alexander couldn't help but smile. Their voices, their mannerisms, even the way they moved, it was as if he were looking at a younger version of himself. His heart clenched with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Was it pride? Longing? Regret? Perhaps all three. Before he realized what he was doing, he stood and approached them. Nice climb, Alexander said as he stopped a few feet away. His voice was warm, friendly, but his heart was pounding. Ethan turned his head, startled. Oh, thanks, he said, his small face breaking into a grin. He carefully climbed down and stood beside Liam, who eyed Alexander curiously. "Do you like trees?" Liam asked, tilting his head. "I do," Alexander replied, crouching slightly to meet their level. "I used to climb trees all the time when I was your age." "Really?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Did you ever fall?" "A couple of times," Alexander admitted with a chuckle. "But that's how you learn, right?" Liam nodded enthusiastically. "We fall a lot too. But we always get back up." Alexander laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even himself. "That's a good way to be." Ethan studied him closely, his gaze filled with curiosity. "You look kind of familiar. Have we met before?" The question caught Alexander off guard. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Maybe in another life," he said softly. Liam nudged his brother. "He talks like Grandpa." Ethan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but cooler." Alexander's chest swelled with unexpected emotion. These boys, his boys, were amazing, and he was missing out on so much. "What are your names?" Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer. "I'm Ethan," said the boy with the slightly messy hair. "And this is Liam." "Nice to meet you, Ethan and Liam." "I'm Alexander." "Nice to meet you too," Liam said brightly. "Do you come to this park a lot?" "Not really," Alexander admitted. "But I think I should." Ethan pointed to a soccer ball lying nearby. "Do you play soccer?" "I used to," Alexander said. "Want to show me what you've got?" The boys' faces lit up, and within moments, the three of them were kicking the ball back and forth across the grassy field. Alexander found himself laughing more than he had in years as the twins showed off their skills, their joy contagious. "You're good at this," Alexander said, genuinely impressed. "Thanks." Liam puffed out his chest. "We practice a lot." "Mom says we're naturals," Ethan added, grinning. "Mom's right," Alexander said softly, a pang of guilt hitting him as he thought of Sophia. He wanted to ask about her, but he knew the moment wasn't right. Instead, he focused on the boys, soaking in every second of their unguarded happiness. "Ethan." "Liam." Sophia's voice rang out, cutting through the afternoon air. The boys turned toward her, their faces lighting up. "Mommy." Alexander straightened, his heart sinking as he saw Sophia striding toward them. Her expression was a mix of shock, anger, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her eyes locking onto Alexander. "I didn't plan this," he said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I was just—" "Mommy, we made a new friend." Ethan interrupted, running to her side. "This is Alexander. He's really good at soccer." Sophia's jaw tightened as she looked from the boys to Alexander. "Boys, go play on the swings for a minute," she said, her voice firm but gentle. But Liam began to protest. "Now," Sophia said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The twins exchanged a glance but obeyed, running off toward the swings. Sophia turned back to Alexander, her eyes blazing. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "I told you to stay away." "I didn't come here looking for them," Alexander said calmly. "I swear. But I'm glad I ran into them." Sophia crossed her arms, her body rigid. "You don't get to be glad, Alexander. You don't get to waltz into their lives like nothing happened." "I'm not trying to disrupt anything," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I can't ignore them, Sophia. They're my sons." "They're my sons," she shot back, her voice cracking slightly. "I raised them. I sacrificed everything for them. You don't get to show up now and pretend you care." Alexander took a step closer, his expression softening. "I do care. I didn't know, Sophia. If I had—" "But you didn't," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "And now they're happy, Alexander. They have a life. I won't let you ruin that." "I don't want to ruin anything," he said. I want to know them. I want to be part of their lives." Sophia shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not that simple." "It can be," Alexander said gently. I'm not asking to take them away from you. I just want a chance to make things right. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, her guard slowly beginning to crack. But then she shook her head again, more resolutely this time. They don't need you, Alexander. We don't need you. With that, she turned and walked away, calling for the boys to follow. Ethan and Liam ran to her side, glancing back at Alexander with confusion and a hint of sadness. As they disappeared into the distance, Alexander stood frozen, his heart heavy. But instead of despair, he felt a new resolve. He wasn't going to give up, not on Sophia, not on Ethan, not on Liam. He had missed too much already. It was time to fight for what mattered most. The tension in the Kane mansion was palpable. Vanessa paced the length of her luxurious bedroom, her manicured nails tapping furiously against her phone screen. The headlines about Alexander had been subdued in recent days, but she knew he was slipping away. His strange behavior, the mysterious children who had shown up at the wedding, and his cold distance since the reception, it was all connected to her. Sophia. Vanessa seethed at the thought of the woman. She had worked too hard to secure her position as Alexander Kane's wife to let anyone, let alone a nobody from his past, destroy it. Her mind raced for a solution, and an idea struck her, a dangerous, desperate idea. She picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Jonathan," she said sharply when the man answered. "I need you to do something for me. No questions asked." A few days later, Vanessa sat in her private study, staring at a set of documents that looked legitimate enough to fool even the most skeptical eye. Bank statements, fabricated text messages, and a carefully crafted letter made it appear as though Sophia had been extorting Alexander for money over the past few months. She smiled to herself, satisfied with the forgery. "Let's see how long she stays in his good graces after this," she muttered, slipping the documents into a sleek folder. Vanessa had a plan. She would accidentally leave the documents in a place where Alexander would find them. He was too sharp to confront Sophia directly without proof, and these forged papers would be all the evidence he needed to cut ties with her for good. Later that evening, Alexander walked into his home office, his tie loosened after a long day. He noticed the folder sitting conspicuously on his desk, marked with a sticky note, "Urgent." Frowning, he opened it. The contents hit him like a punch to the gut. Bank statements showed large sums of money supposedly transferred from his accounts to Sophia's. There were screenshots of text messages that appeared to be from Sophia, demanding more money in exchange for keeping quiet about the twins. Alexander's first reaction was disbelief. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, flipping through the pages. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the situation. But something about the documents felt off. The wording in the texts didn't sound like Sophia. And the transactions, he'd have remembered those amounts leaving his accounts. Suspicion crept in. He picked up his phone and dialed his financial advisor. "Mark, I need you to check something for me. Look into these supposed transactions from my accounts over the past 6 months. I need answers immediately." The following morning, Mark called back with his findings. "Alexander, those transactions are completely fabricated," he said. "There's no record of them in your accounts, and the routing numbers don't match any legitimate institutions." Alexander exhaled sharply, his suspicions confirmed. "Thanks, Mark. That's all I needed to know." Hanging up, he turned his attention to the texts. He reached out to his IT team, asking them to verify the authenticity of the screenshots. Within hours, they reported back. "Sir, the messages were doctored," one of the technicians explained. "They weren't sent from your phone or hers. The metadata suggests they were created recently, probably using a spoofing app." Alexander's jaw tightened as he processed the information. There was only one person who could have orchestrated this: Vanessa. That evening, Alexander walked into the living room where Vanessa was lounging on the couch, a glass of red wine in her hand. She looked up at him with a practiced smile. "Alex, you're home early," she said sweetly. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold. Vanessa's smile faltered. "About what?" Alexander threw the folder onto the coffee table in front of her. "About this." Vanessa's eyes widened as she glanced at the documents. She quickly composed herself, feigning confusion. "What is this?" You tell me, Alexander said, crossing his arms. Because I had my team look into it, and it's all fake. The transactions, the messages, every single piece of it. Vanessa's cheeks flushed, but she forced a laugh. Alex, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen these before. Don't lie to me, he snapped, his voice rising. You planted this on my desk. You wanted me to think Sophia was blackmailing me. Vanessa's facade cracked, and her eyes filled with panic. I was trying to protect you, she cried. That woman is dangerous, Alex. She's trying to ruin us. Stop, Alexander said, his tone icy. Sophia hasn't done anything but raise my sons alone for 7 years. She tried to reach me, and you made sure I never heard from her. And now you're trying to destroy her reputation? For what? To keep your place in my life. Vanessa stood, her voice desperate. I did it for us, Alex. Everything I've done has been for us. No, he said, his voice firm. Everything you've done has been for yourself. You bribed my assistant, you lied to me, and now you've tried to sabotage an innocent woman. You've crossed every line. Vanessa's composure crumbled as tears streamed down her face. Alex, please, she begged. I made a mistake. Don't let this ruin us. But Alexander's expression was resolute. You ruined us, Vanessa. You did this. The next day, the story broke in the media. Vanessa's attempt to frame Sophia was exposed, and Alexander made sure the truth about her actions was clear. Articles detailing her deceit and manipulation spread like wildfire, accompanied by public statements from Alexander condemning her behavior. Vanessa's carefully crafted reputation as a philanthropist and socialite crumbled under the weight of the scandal. She became the target of public outrage, her face plastered across tabloids with headlines like Vanessa Kane's Web of Lies and Billionaire's Wife Exposed in Shocking Blackmail Plot. Her social circle turned on her almost immediately. Invitations to galas and events dried up, and former friends distanced themselves. The life she had built on lies was falling apart. Alexander, meanwhile, felt a sense of closure. He had severed ties with Vanessa and cleared Sophia's name. More importantly, he was ready to take the next step in rebuilding his relationship with Sophia and his sons. As he stood on the balcony of his penthouse that evening, he thought about the twins, Ethan and Liam, and the bond they had begun to form. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. This time, he wouldn't let anything stand in the way of his family. The soft hum of a nearby coffee machine filled the quiet cafe. Sophia sat at a small corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting warm patterns across the wooden floors. She glanced at the clock on her phone and sighed. She didn't know why she had agreed to meet Alexander today. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was exhaustion from the persistent calls and messages he had been sending for weeks. Either way, she felt uneasy. The door jingled as it opened, and she looked up. There he was, Alexander Kane. He had traded his usual tailored suits for a simple sweater and jeans, but he still carried himself with the same quiet authority that had always defined him. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small, hesitant smile as he approached the table. "Hi, Sophia," he said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. "Alexander," she replied, her tone guarded. She took a sip of her tea, trying to steady herself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice earnest. "I know I don't deserve it." Sophia set her mug down and folded her hands on the table. "Why am I here, Alexander? What do you want?" He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "I want to apologize, Sophia, for everything. For not being there, for not knowing about Ethan and Liam. For not trying harder to understand what happened." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You didn't know because you didn't want to know. I tried to reach you, Alexander. I tried so many times." "I know," he said, his voice laced with regret. "I found out what Vanessa did, how she blocked you from contacting me. I had no idea, Sophia. If I'd known. Sophia shook her head, cutting him off. But you didn't. And while you were living your perfect life, I was raising 2 boys on my own. Do you have any idea how hard that was? Alexander's gaze dropped to the table, shame evident in his posture. I can't imagine, he admitted. But I want to make it right. I want to be there for them. For you. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. What does that mean, Alexander? Are you offering money? Because we don't need it. I'm not just offering money, he said quickly. But yes, I want to help financially. I know it's the least I can do after everything you've been through. Sophia's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. We've made it this far without your money, Alexander. I don't want a check. I want to know you're serious about being part of their lives. I am, he said, his voice steady. I don't just want to write a check and disappear, Sophia. I want to be their father. I want to get to know them, spend time with them, and show them I care. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. You don't just get to show up now and play dad. It doesn't work like that. I know, he said softly. And I don't expect it to be easy. I know I've missed so much, 7 years of their lives that I can never get back. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Sophia sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Ethan and Liam are amazing, Alexander. They're kind, smart, and so full of life. I've worked hard to give them a stable, happy life. The last thing I want is for you to come in and turn everything upside down. I don't want to disrupt their lives, he said. I just want to be part of them. She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. Do you know how many times they've asked about their dad? How many times I've had to make excuses because I didn't know what to say? I protected them from the truth because I didn't want them to feel unwanted. Alexander's throat tightened. They're not unwanted, Sophia. I want them. I want to know them, to be there for them. Please, give me a chance. Sophia wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. It's not just about me, Alexander. It's about them. They've never had a father in their lives, and I'm not going to let anyone hurt them, not even you. I won't hurt them, he promised. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to prove myself to you and to them. She hesitated, her heart torn between protecting her boys and giving Alexander a chance to make amends. Finally, she nodded. Fine. But it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to earn their trust. And mine. Alexander nodded, relief washing over his face. I will, Sophia. I promise. The next weekend, Alexander met Ethan and Liam at the park. Sophia stood at a distance, watching cautiously as the boys played soccer with their father. At first, the twins were shy, unsure of how to interact with him. But Alexander's patience and enthusiasm quickly won them over. Nice kick, Liam, he called as the boy sent the ball soaring toward the goal. You've got some serious skills. Liam beamed, his confidence growing. You think so? Absolutely, Alexander said, ruffling his hair. You're a natural. Ethan joined in, challenging Alexander to a game of one-on-one. The 3 of them laughed and played until the sun began to set, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. Sophia watched from the sidelines, her emotions a mix of hope and fear. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man Alexander could become, a father who was willing to fight for his sons. Over the weeks that followed, Alexander continued to show up. He attended the twin school events, cheered them on at soccer games, and spent quiet evenings reading to them before bed. Slowly but surely, Ethan and Liam began to trust him, their initial hesitance giving way to genuine affection. One evening, as Alexander tucked Liam into bed, the boy looked up at him with wide eyes. Are you really going to stay, Dad? The word hit Alexander like a bolt of lightning. It was the first time either of the twins had called him Dad. I'm not going anywhere, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise. Sophia watched these moments unfold with a guarded heart. She saw the way the boys lit up around Alexander, the way they talked about him when he wasn't there. Slowly, Her own walls began to crumble. One evening, as she and Alexander stood on her porch after the twins had gone to bed, she turned to him. "They're starting to trust you," she said softly. "So am I." Alexander met her gaze, his own eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you, Sophia, for giving me this chance." She nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," he said firmly. "I promise." The headlines hit like a thunderstorm, spreading across every major news outlet. Kane Industries faces scandal. Fraud allegations surface, screamed one headline. Alexander Kane's empire on the brink of collapse, read another. The once mighty business magnate, revered for his brilliance and power, was now the subject of media frenzy and public scrutiny. Alexander sat alone in his now eerily quiet office, the large windows behind him offering a view of the city he had once ruled. Papers were strewn across his desk, legal notices, stock reports, and emails from board members, all demanding answers he didn't have. His tailored suit, which once made him feel invincible, now felt suffocating. The scandal had been orchestrated masterfully by Vanessa's family. Angry and humiliated after Vanessa's fall from grace, they had used their wealth and influence to fabricate documents, leak damning but false accusations, and tarnish Alexander's reputation. His company's stock plummeted overnight, and investors pulled out en masse. Within weeks, his empire crumbled. The phone on his desk buzzed, pulling Alexander out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and saw Sophia's name. For a moment, he hesitated. He hadn't told her the full extent of what was happening. What could he say? That the man she and the twins had begun to trust was now a shadow of himself? With a heavy sigh, he answered, "Sophia." "Alex," her voice came through, warm but tinged with concern. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" He leaned back in his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I've been better," he admitted. "It's bad, Sophia. Worse than I expected." "Do you need help?" she asked, her tone steady. He laughed bitterly. "Help? There's nothing anyone can do. I've lost almost everything." There was a pause on the line before Sophia spoke again. "You haven't lost us." Her words hit him harder than any headline or legal notice. He closed his eyes, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Sophia, you and the boys don't deserve this. I've brought chaos into your lives." "We've been through chaos before, Alex," she said gently. "We survived it then, and we'll survive it now. Together." Later that evening, Alexander drove to Sophia's modest home. It was a far cry from the grandeur he was used to, but it had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where he felt human, not just a businessman or a billionaire. As he walked through the door, Ethan and Liam ran to greet him, their faces lighting up. "Dad!" they exclaimed in unison, wrapping their arms around him. "Hey guys," Alexander said, kneeling to hug them tightly. Their innocence, their unshaken love, was both comforting and heartbreaking. "Mom told us you had a bad day," Ethan said, his voice laced with concern. Alexander glanced at Sophia, who stood in the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed but her expression soft. "Yeah," he said, turning back to his sons. "A very bad day. Did someone make you mad?" Liam asked, his small fists clenching as if ready to defend his father. Alexander chuckled despite himself. "Something like that," he said. "But don't worry about me. I'll figure it out." "Can we help?" Ethan asked earnestly. "You already are," Alexander said, ruffling their hair. "Just by being here." After dinner, the boys fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie. Alexander sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee Sophia had made for him. She joined him, sliding into the seat across from him. "You look exhausted," she said softly. "I am," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "This is the lowest I've ever been. I don't know how to climb out of this." Sophia reached out, placing her hand over his. "You will. You're Alexander Kane. You built an empire from nothing before, and you can do it again." He shook his head. "Not this time. Vanessa's family made sure of that. My name is ruined, Sophia. Even if I wanted to start over, no one would trust me. You don't need to rebuild an empire, she said firmly. You just need to rebuild yourself. And you don't have to do it alone. Her words hung in the air, filling the silence between them. Alexander looked at her, his eyes glistening. Why are you doing this? After everything I've put you through, why are you still here? Because you're family, she said simply. And family doesn't walk away when things get hard. In the weeks that followed, Alexander began adjusting to his new reality. He moved into a modest apartment, selling off his penthouse and other luxuries to cover legal fees and debts. For the first time in years, he found himself living without the safety net of his wealth. But he wasn't alone. Sophia and the twins were a constant presence, inviting him over for dinner, encouraging him to attend Ethan's soccer games and Liam's school plays. Slowly, Alexander realized that he hadn't truly lost everything. He still had something worth fighting for. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Ethan looked up at Alexander. "Dad, are you happy?" The question caught Alexander off guard. He glanced at Sophia, who smiled softly, then back at his son. "You know what? I think I am. Even without all your money?" Liam asked curiously. Alexander chuckled. "Money doesn't make you happy, buddy. Being with the people you love does." Ethan and Liam exchanged a look, then nodded as if they understood a profound truth. As time passed, Alexander began to rebuild, not an empire, but a life. He took a consulting job with a small startup, using his experience to guide young entrepreneurs. It wasn't glamorous, but it was fulfilling. Sophia, too, noticed the change in him. He was more present, more grounded. The man who had once seemed untouchable now laughed easily, helped with homework, and spent hours kicking a soccer ball around the yard with the twins. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the boys play, Sophia turned to Alexander. "You've come a long way. I couldn't have done it without you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I think you've finally figured out what really matters." Alexander looked out at the yard, where Ethan and Liam were chasing each other with boundless energy. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. "I have," he said softly, "and I'm not letting it go." The auditorium buzzed with excitement as families and friends gathered to celebrate the graduating class. Rows of chairs were filled with proud parents, siblings, and grandparents, while students in black caps and gowns lined up backstage. The air was alive with anticipation, and the faint sound of the school band rehearsing added to the joyous atmosphere. Alexander Kane sat in the middle row, sandwiched between Sophia and Liam, waiting for Ethan's turn to walk across the stage. His once impeccably tailored suits had been replaced by a simple but neatly pressed shirt and slacks. He looked around the room, marveling at the normalcy of it all. No flashing cameras, no reporters, no crowds clamoring for his attention, just a room full of people celebrating their loved ones. It was the life he had never imagined for himself, and yet, it was everything he had ever wanted. As the ceremony began, Alexander leaned over to Liam. "Are you excited for your brother?" he asked with a smile. Liam, now a tall and confident young man, grinned. "Of course. But he better not trip on the stage. I'll never let him live it down." Sophia chuckled softly, nudging Liam. "Be nice. This is a big moment." Alexander glanced at her, his heart swelling. She hadn't changed much in the years since they'd reconnected. Still strong, still kind, still the anchor of their family. He reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Thank you," he said quietly. Sophia turned to him, her brow furrowing. "For what?" "For everything," he said simply. "For believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." She smiled, her eyes soft. "You've more than earned it, Alex." When Ethan's name was called, Alexander's heart swelled with pride. He stood with the rest of the family, clapping and cheering as Ethan walked confidently across the stage to receive his diploma. The young man who stood before the audience was a far cry from the shy, wide-eyed boy Alexander had met years ago. Ethan was poised, self-assured, and ready to take on the world. "Way to go, Ethan!" Liam shouted, earning a playful glare from his brother as he waved to the crowd. Alexander laughed, his chest tight with emotion. He caught Ethan's eye as he returned to his seat, and the brief smile they exchanged spoke volumes. It was a moment of connection, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had been on together. After the ceremony, the family gathered outside under the bright afternoon sun. Graduates mingled with their families, posing for pictures and exchanging hugs. Ethan joined them, his cap slightly askew and his diploma clutched in his hand. "Proud of you, son," Alexander said, pulling him into a hug. "You've worked so hard for this." "Thanks, Dad," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you and Mom." Sophia stepped forward, wrapping Ethan in a warm embrace. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. You've earned this." As Liam joined in, playfully ruffling Ethan's hair, Alexander stepped back, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. He thought about the path that had brought him here, the rise and fall of his empire, the scandal, and the rediscovery of what truly mattered. Losing his fortune had once seemed like the end of the world, but now he saw it as the beginning of a new life. News of Vanessa's arrest had reached him a few months earlier. Her greed and desperation had led her to embezzle funds from her family's trust, and when the truth came to light, she had been left with no allies. The same social circle that had once celebrated her turned its back, and she faced the consequences of her actions alone. Alexander felt no joy in her downfall, only a quiet sense of closure. She had chosen her path, and it had led her to ruin. He, on the other hand, had been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild, not his wealth, but his life. That evening, the family gathered at their modest home for a small celebration. The table was filled with Ethan's favorite dishes, lovingly prepared by Sophia and Liam. The twins joked and teased each other, their laughter filling the air. As they sat down to eat, Alexander raised his glass. "To Ethan," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "And to this family, for showing me what really matters." "To family," Ethan echoed, raising his glass with a smile. "To love," Sophia added, her eyes meeting Alexander's. "To dessert," Liam said with a grin, earning groans and laughter from everyone at the table. Later that night, after the boys had gone to bed, Alexander and Sophia sat together on the porch. The stars twinkled above them, and the air was filled with the chirping of crickets. Alexander leaned back in his chair, a sense of peace washing over him. "Do you ever miss it?" Sophia asked softly. He turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Miss what?" "The old life. The money, the power, the spotlight." Alexander thought for a moment before shaking his head. "Not even a little," he said. "Back then, I thought those things made me who I was. But now, I see how empty it all was." He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "This is what matters, Sophia. You, the boys, this life we've built together. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Sophia smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you found your way back to us." "Me too," he said quietly. "Me too." As they sat together under the stars, Alexander felt a profound sense of gratitude. Losing everything had been the hardest thing he'd ever faced, but it had led him to what truly mattered, a life filled with love, family, and integrity. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.